There's something for everyone, right? It's what makes the human race so special. Not all of us like the same things. Growing up in Middle England in the 90s, I had to hide the fact that I love reading comics in secondary school. Me, Paddy, and Gaz had to sneak off to the woods behind the leisure centre to enjoy on a Monday afternoon whatever we'd had over the weekend due to the verbal bullying which would have ensued if we were found out. It's also the place we talked about the Spider-Man, X-Men and Batman animated series episodes which popped up on a Saturday afternoon, BBC Two and ITV, but I've also been a huge fan of alternative music. I used to love Prodigy, Elton John, Queen, Meatloaf. Pulp was my go-to over Oasis and Blur. White Stripes are still one of my go-to listens, a band most people think are one-hit wonders as Seven Nation Army gets blasted at every football ground, every game around the country. But I prefer songs like Hotel Yorba or We're Gonna Be Friends. Even films growing up, I loved Japanese samurai films like Seven Samurai, westerns like Good, the Bad and the Ugly, along with Chinese action films by Jackie Chan and Jet Li, stuff like Police Story, First Strike or The Legend. Not your typical teenage fodder, but to me this day there's a certain collection of Bruce Willis or Steven Seagal films that I call stand, but my father and granddad adore, so long as it features no plot and a bloke absolutely slaughtering people with guns or karate, they just love it. It's mindless fun to them that kills an hour and a half, and that's exactly what I think of this game. Some people will enjoy it, it's easy to table, pretty generic mindless dungeon crawling, but me, I'm just not into it at all. Nothing about this game worked for me in the slightest, and that's why I've given Tiny Epic Dungeons a 1 out of 5. So let's start with the positives and then slowly drift into everything I don't like. The best part of this game is the cost. The very small box that's easy to store anywhere, and the meeple miniatures for the minions. These meeples with printed on designs look amazing and are by far some of the best looking meeples I've ever seen. So much that I wish the boss meeples wore a paid for add-on during the Kickstarter, as I would have loved to see those meeples in action, and I honestly wish they would have gone with these meeples for the heroes, as the models are your pretty much bog standard 25mm plastic style fodder that I wouldn't have ever painted even if I was keeping this, and are basically unneeded like most Kickstarter minis games, but exist just to tick a box for what sells on Kickstarter. The minis are pretty small and average. You can't see the differences between all the heroes as they have individual distinguishing features, but suffer from a lack of prominent detail you get from better quality minis. This is what I call the Reaper Bones effect. It's lacking, it's nothing special, and I feel printed on meeples would have looked much better and made the product more unique. But the computer these days, of course, says you need minis, and that's where my positives end. This is what earned them a point. Now we go on to the nil point, and we shall start with gameplay. Everything about this game is random. Now, some would say, well, it's a dungeon crawler, duh, it's supposed to be random, but here you get randomception, where randomness has randomness. It starts with the boss. You pick that at random. Then the dungeon gets divided into 3 piles and you shuffle them into form a deck, which is not only drawn at random but forces you to card count, as after opening just 2 to 3 rooms you can't unfortunately draw a mini boss creature called a minion, which can destroy you without gear. Seriously, I recommend card counting to get you out of an early game bind. Anyway, the dungeon being random means you can't open up parts of it your hero might not be able to deal with, and then you have to roll dice, which are horrifically random, as you have a +1 and +2, which you can add to your rolls of 3, 4, 5, 6, but most things need a 7 or 8 here to be successful. So you simultaneously want to roll bad and get one great result, so you can add numbers on to a 5 and a 6, otherwise you're often screwed. Then you have treasure rewards, which are random at first, unless you drop it, because they are blooming useless, and another hero will need to walk to a certain room to pick them up. But even the loot you wanted doesn't exactly give you much meaningful buffs. You might get 1 or 2 strength to your hit rolls or magic if you have enough pieces of a certain type of gear. You might get a bit of shield for defense, which ends up being absolutely useless, as the only time you use defense is during counter attacks. Enemies just go through it at any other time. And talking of enemies, they only attack either on every counter attack of yours, like they are Floyd Mayweather, or when the ever-decreasing torchlight hits a certain mark. If none of those things happen, the monsters just stand there gormless, scratching their arse or picking their nose. There's nothing that takes you out the experience more than your barbarian looting the next room to a minion and gleefully flashing a bit of leg at it, but them doing nothing in response. The torchlight, though, is one of the worst offenders in this game. It decreases after every hero has taken their turn. Now, in a solo game, you only play 2 heroes, so the torchlight is further down the track for some idiotic goddamn reason, where there are a load of goblin spawns and enemy actions within the first couple of turns. So you're forced into rushing, you're forced into opening up the 4 cards nearest to you to see what's actually about. Then you need to choose a place to go that you're capable of handling, be that a trap room or goblin room, of which you hope you just uncovered 4 on the random dungeon layout, because if there's 5 goblins who are going to be on the board, you lose instantly, and you can only deal with 1, because as soon as you come across an enemy, they go all Gandalf and shout, "You shall not pass," which is super annoying during boss fights when you want to fight the boss alone, because they are tough as nails, and these little bleeders stop you from walking over and even tickling it, because the bosses have way too much armor. But more on that in a bit. The torchlight sprints off like Linford Christie, forcing you into a certain type of playstyle where it's not really about exploration or crawling through a dungeon. It's about time management. You have very little movement. You only have 1 action. Yes, you can always use free ones, but they are often blooming useless. The useful stuff like attacking or disarming traps that get you loot is all in 1 action per round. And if you're playing correctly, which is let's go into the dark unknown room, you could just be stopped in your tracks instantly. So you're forced to always play the free undercover adjacent rooms action to see what it actually there. And I don't have a problem with the 7x7 max grid, which is what the dungeon is supposed to be. But when you flip over a tile, you have to spin the bleeding thing around, because there are entrances and exits on the card placed at random. Some have 4, which means you place 3 hidden tiles around it. Some have 3, which means you then have 2. But you have to spin it around to where the 2 can be placed and will get blocked in by other tiles, and others have 1, which of course can lead to dead ends, or worst means the boss lair tile, which is of course placed at random, could end up in an area miles away from where everyone else is. You have to split up, and all the time management you're having to take on, and you're constantly rushing whilst Linford and his torch decrease faster and faster, because as soon as the torch hits the end, it's game over. But it's also game over if you, whilst spinning the dungeon tiles around, place the blooming boss one. I haven't had that myself, but I suppose it could theoretically happen, otherwise it wouldn't be in the god-awful rulebook. More on that in a sec also. Let's carry on with the tiles, as with you spinning them right round baby right round means the card is going to end up askew and the whole dungeon layout looks a blooming mess with symbols and tokens sprawled out everywhere, and heaven forbid you don't disarm a trap because you haven't got time to do it. You know that trap is going to be down a certain corridor everyone is going to have to traverse, and if a trap disarmed have to roll every bleeding time you go through that room, it's a stupid slowdown mechanic, just like the goblins, which barely do anything with their 1 health but force you to stop, hit them and suffer the decrease on the torch marker 3/4 of the time, getting some poxy useless loot card or spell one. Spells can be better in this game, but only by a little margin, as you still suffer counter attacks if they can't see ya, and there's not many spells without line of sight use. But of course, if you use a spell, you're done for the round, like all attacks. Gotta decrease that torchlight. Now, there is one way to increase it, and that's by beating the minions. You have so many minions randomly in the dungeon as there are heroes, so 2 heroes will face 2 minions. The meeples are awesome on these, but they are mini bosses. They move fast, hit hard, and have armor also, which means you best have found some loot on your travels, or else it's time to soil your armor, as these have way more than 1 health to chew through. They are your first obstacle to overcome, and you need to kill them all, or else you're not even allowed to play knocked or run on the boss's lair, or the minions are the key to opening it. The other ritual saft symbols we will talk about after. But these things are tough to take on, so if you haven't been card counting, you can, by sheer unluckiness, encounter them after just a few room unlocks, and if that happens, it's a game over. You really need a few bits of loot to take these things on, or else you get stuck in death loops, which is an absolutely stupid idea. Seriously, I have no idea how this made it past early playtesting. Basically, if you get knocked down, you get back up again. They're never going to keep you down. You're Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow, except you only get 3 health back. And if you're stuck in a room with enemies, your core move. A goblin is fine, but a minion, or worse, a boss death loop, is ridiculous in low player numbers, as you can both be in the room dead, just popping back up, hitting, and down again on the counter attack. Of course, after every death the torchlight goes down, so you're up and down like a yo-yo until the torch runs out. Absolute saftness. The death loops are atrocious, and they are the first thing I house ruled by respawning a hero at one of the closest ritual zones without an enemy with full health and focus. The torch was the other thing I house ruled, placing it on the 4-player marker for the majority of my playthroughs, of which there were only 6 that I absolutely hated. But if you are lucky enough to kill a minion, they gleefully push the torch track back up 6 spaces, so by the time you've got the loot to take them on, you're near the end of the torchlight, and you get 6 goos back, which, unless you've uncovered the next minion already, you're left searching again with an ever-decreasing torch. How delightful. Seriously, I'm not going to lie right now, in my 6 playthroughs I've uncovered just 1 boss fight without house rules, and from reading online, most people's complaints are that they can't get to the boss. Most die to the minions or just run out of torchlight, and that right there for me is terrible game design, especially for a dungeon crawler where you want to at least take on the boss. Even if you lose, you like to see the bleeding thing in all of its glory. Even Elden Ring cures the problem of Soulsborne's bosses by letting you not get caught in a death loop and letting you explore other areas or level up to get loot to make it easier for the less skilled players. It's a easy fix really that should have been caught during playtesting, but if you're one of those lucky few to meet the boss by defeating the minions, traipsing over to the boss's lair door and going inside, you get greeted by a large room with selective movement spaces which either grant buffs or give disadvantages, and of course only one hero can stand on one space. Not everyone gets a buff. What do you think these game designers are? Generous? No, you're lucky to get a +2 on your rolls if you're lucky enough to rush over to usually the furthest part of the boss lair, and then you discover the true meaning of the ritual symbols. They block the boss from taking any more damage at certain points. Yes, you can go through all that rushing of the dungeon, you can count your cards correctly to make sure you get the right loot you want, you can deck yourself out ready for a fight and feel prepared, as when the boss is uncovered the torchlight track flips over and starts again for Act 2, but heaven forbid you get a great attack off on the already tough as nails boss with already ridiculous armor values, only to lower the boss's health to one of the symbols, and then all of a sudden you hurt it. No, the boss goes all Annie for attack on Titan and crystallizes. Its health can't drop past that point, but of course the torchlight can still decrease and it can smack you back, bringing in the joys of death loops again. Nope, as soon as you meet the boss you have to say hi, run back out into the lair, get your barbarian to dress as Brunhilde like Bugs Bunny does, and taunt the boss by saying cooey on one of the ritual spaces. The boss then drops everything, goes hubba hubba, and darts after the taunting hero until it hits a ritual zone, and then goes, "Curses, you found my Achilles heel, now I can be defeated." And some of these blooming bosses have more than one symbol that you have to taunt them towards, so keep track of that torchlight, make sure you've disarmed traps, or don't get goblins which still randomly spawn at the start zone and need to be dealt with as if on a 5 when they appear nowhere near you whilst you're dealing with a boss. It's game over. Yes, this game is blooming atrocious. I haven't killed a boss. In fact, I've never got anywhere near defeating one in my 6 playthroughs. I think I've managed to take 4, maybe 5 health off one, and that's it. And I won't ever take one out, as I'm never going to play this game again. In fact, this review isn't in my normal style where I unbox, show setup and go through the game, because I refuse to play this game again, and in fact it will probably be sold by the time this review goes up on the channel. I hated every single one of my playthroughs. There was no shining light during any of the 6 times I played it. I found nothing here that I liked. This game was diabolical. I did not get on with it at all. I hated every single part of the gameplay, and less said about the rulebook the better, as it has more symbolism than the Matrix films. Yes, I get that it's supposed to be tiny and epic, but that forced the rulebook to be chock full of nothing but symbols, and the game itself to be full of them also. They are on the tiles, on the hero cards, on the weapons and armor, on the boss tile, on the dice, on the torchlight card, on the enemy cards, the goblin tiles. Everything gets a symbol and nothing is explained anywhere except for maybe 1 or 2 words. The rulebook is so bad they had to release a day 1 DLC rulebook pack which is 15 pages long, and only then can you begin to understand what everything does, including weapons and hero abilities, that left many people like myself scratching their heads. I'm medically classed as partially blind. I need to be able to see or tell what I'm looking at clearly and concisely, and I struggled majorly with this one in its base game form. If it wasn't for the day 1 DLC, I probably wouldn't have got past playing it that once, and in that game I found the minion tile after 6 uncovered zones and got caught in my first death loop. A brilliant first time experience, of course. Now, full disclaimer, I didn't even bother with the Tiny Epic Stories box, haven't even looked at anything but the minis. I did try the potions in my last 2 games, but they really didn't come into play at all, so I can't offer any discussion in the way of those 2 additions. My experience is base game only, probably the way most people are going to buy this from shops and play it, and I'm not going to lie or sugarcoat anything. I absolutely hated this game. It wasn't for me at all. Will it be for you? I have no idea. I can only give my opinion of this as is, and there seems to be loads of others out there who really enjoy this. They enjoy the small box, the minis, the quick gameplay and setup time. They enjoy feeling rushed and losing, never meeting the boss. There's also a load of folk who just love Tiny Epic style games. This was my first. I've never played any others, and I doubt I ever will because of how much distaste I have for this one. I didn't enjoy one iota of any single part of the 6 playthroughs I did. I forced myself to play this more than 3 times for this review to gather my full thoughts on it, and that just makes things worse, really. You shouldn't ever force yourself to like anything ever. Even love is no exception, as Andre 3000 said, because really you just end up hating it even more. Whenever I was playing this, I felt like I was wasting my time. I wanted to play something I actually enjoy. I wanted to get Massive Darkness out, or even go down my mother's and fish out Dark Souls, a game that has major faults, but one I enjoy a lot more than this. And it's because of those feelings, this gets a 1 out of 5 for me. This is the second worst board game I've ever played. For me, it's just that bad. It slots in just behind Peaky Blinders under new management, which will probably sit as the worst forever, as it's not even a game. But this, I hated it. I didn't get on with any of the game mechanics, systems, rulebook, minis. The only thing I like is basically the minion meeples. They are cute, but that is just one bloke's opinion on the internet. I've explained myself fully. You might feel different, and if you do, I'm glad, because it means you won't have the feeling that you've wasted your money and you'll struggle to get it back. So with that, tatty bye.